Chapter 9. Through autumn, Chanticleer's coop is a hospital, though one full of good cheer. The rain never stopped. Sometimes it was no more than a chill mist sitting on the air. Other times it came down suddenly like an angry fist, and the coop shuddered against it. The sky stood iron above, and the weird wind was ever out of the east. The trees lost their leaves, but there was no beauty in it this year, nor any color but rot. It was as if they had simply given up to the moisture and the cold, and forgotten life. Nor was there any crackling of dry leaves, nor the sharp scent, clean and musty, of falling leaves, nor the blue bite of the year going out. Damp foliage was stripped from the trees by an everlasting rain. The naked trees shivered, that was all. But if mud and a bleak season lay all around, then Chanticleer's coop was a warm, blessed island in the middle of it all. This little company of creatures was proof against dreariness, and together they were very happy. On account of the strange weather, they lived in an unending twilight. Yet the rooster must have had a rising and setting sun on the inside of him, for lauds and prime he always crowed on time. Terce, sext, and none he observed ever on the button. Vespers and compline he kept as they should be kept, and his small society was kept very well that way. Chattering and motion and light and warmth filled the coop, as if it were a little furnace in a dark land. Food went into stomachs, gossip attended every ear, and the good cheer of the morning made waking a pleasant thing, while friendship, which filled the evenings, made sleep a good conclusion. The creatures were happy because they were busy with good and important matters. 4 adults and 7 children needed constant care, for they were convalescing, and 30 hens, a weasel occasionally visiting, a contingent of black ants, a fox of good sense, Lord Russell by name, and several others were all more than willing to give these sick ones that care. 4 adults. Chanticleer himself healed more quickly than anyone else. This was not just because he had so strong a constitution, one well able to knit even the most open wound, but this was also because his spirits were so high. Chanticleer laughed enormously and often these days. He talked much, and he would talk on any topic available to anyone who asked a question, and given more than 2 ears listening to his words with earnest attention, the rooster began to fancy himself a philosopher. He stared at the ceiling and spoke grandly of God and the ways of the deity. He disclosed the hidden patterns of his effective rule. Most particularly, he discoursed on beauty, female beauty, its attraction to the male, the special appeal of the color crimson, especially when crimson is placed by nature like a blossom at the throat of a hen. And he smiled in his sleep these nights, Chanticleer did, because his dreams were all good. And he worked trills and cadenzas into his crows, and he healed very quickly. Ah, beauty! There was a 31st hen in Chanticleer's coop, she of the burning crimson throat. Her name was Pertolote, though Chanticleer seldom reduced his naming her, or made it anything less than the beautiful Pertolote. She healed more slowly than he did because her illness went deeper, because this land was strange to her, and for another reason. The beautiful Pertolote almost never spoke about herself, not to Chanticleer, who so often found cause to sit next to her, not to Beryl, who wanted so badly to help the lady, but who didn't know what to do since the lady wouldn't tell her of her hurt. To be sure, the lady talked. "My lady slept poorly last night," Beryl would say privately to her. "I mark how she whimpered and wept in her sleep, and once she cried out, 'Dreams can be doused, lady. Please, ma'am, let me give you a potion before tonight, or tell me what your dreams are, that I can make the proper mix.'" But the beautiful Pertolote would speak of things vastly different from what Beryl had in mind. "Beryl, have you always lived in this coop?" "Aye, ma'am." A brief pause for the lady's wanderings, and then, "Is it your breathing? Does your breathing torture you?" "Then have you always known the rooster of this household?" "That I have, ma'am." "So golden his feathers, and redder than fine coral his comb, his nails whiter than the lily flower, Has he always borne his head so proudly? Beryl blinked. That is his manner, ma'am. Ah, what will my lady eat? Please you, ma'am, you must eat. If you'll tell me what likes you, I'll grind a little mustard seed into it, that you may mend. Or will you tell me where the pain lies inside of you? Has he always been a rooster? Ma'am? Has this Chanticleer always been a rooster? Was he ever anything else beside a rooster? Was he ever but the image of a rooster? Forgive me, ma'am. Let me get you a drop of water. You don't understand what I ask you. My lady excites herself. She breathes too fast, and that is her pain. Let me bring you a wee cup. I'll warm it with an herb or two. Beryl? Ma'am? You are very kind to me. Ma'am. Beryl had come to love the beautiful Perlote immediately. But finally the poor hen had simply to guess what ailed her lady, and she had to mix her medicines without a true knowledge of the pain. She used nard mostly, for that seemed most to ease the lady, but seeming is not certainty, and that distressed the anxious nurse. Perlote would speak about herself to no one, not even to Chanticleer. Chanticleer had to learn what he could about her past and her arrival in his land from the third victim in this coop-shaped hospital, and even the information which he gathered from the wee widow mouse was next to nothing. The wee widow mouse and her 7 children had a dry room all to themselves. They had moved into Ebenezer Rat's old nest beneath the floorboards. There they found food, furniture, and bedding enough to make them peaceful, and to help them heal nearly as fast as Chanticleer. The widow had had dreadful dreams, too, at first. Some of the hens had supposed these dreams to have come out of the air, from the evil fumosity which still murked through Neezer's tunnels. But the words which the mouse said during her dreams had nothing to do with a rat. Rather, they were spoken to a husband who was not there, and they described things which the hens had never seen before. Soon the dreams passed, and the mouse settled down to being a mother, apologizing many times a day for her 7 children. The tiny mice figured that every chicken's wing in the world was made for climbing into. Hens woke up with the widow's children snuggled under their feathers. Chanticleer could get the widow to talk about her children any time, but every time he turned the conversation to her trip down river, he saw all over again the staring little mouse who he first met in an open field. "But why would you take that trip?" he would ask in the middle of another sentence. "What could make you do such a thing?" And then the mouse would grow silent. Her body would seem to shrink, and she would only look at him. She would step backward as if there were a punishment coming to her from somewhere. And when he talked softly, assuring her again and again of his kind thoughts toward her, the look would only change, filling up with many questions as eyes fill up with tears. All that Chanticleer could patch together was that it had been a long, long, dangerous ride. The trip had started out in sudden panic. Nobody had planned on it, therefore nobody had planned for it, although Chanticleer thought that the wee widow must have acted wonderfully fast, because he remembered how skillfully the hair had been woven over the bird's nest. All of the women on the many branch boats launched were strangers to one another, and when the branches were snatched by the current, some of the women were drowned straight away because they had no experience with water or with wood, and because one did not know how to help the other. Fear separated them. In the end there had been, besides the hen, whom the widow was now so grateful to know, 2 other women on the widow's branches, but one had died of certain wounds during the night. The other might still be alive somewhere, but that was doubtful. She had gone raving mad one day, skittering all over the branches and chattering nonsense until she announced that she was going home, and she dived into the water. The widow had not seen her again, not even to come up for air. She had been given a kind of hopeless courage by that drama, to think nothing, speak nothing, do nothing, all on account of her children. On the next day, her branches were caught by the reaching arms. This was, of course, not much for the rooster to know, and it didn't come all at once. Over many days, and with several tricks, he learned this information from the wee widow. But every time he said, or even hinted, "Why did you take that trip at all?" the widow went deadly silent, totally ignorant of the importance of causes to rulers to make decisions. Instead, her eyes returned the why to him, and neither did he have an answer. So much the philosopher he was not, and his own ignorance before her eyes hurt him. After their first meeting, the wee widow mouse never again mentioned her husband or his death under the terebinth oak. That was the only picture which Chanticleer had of anything before the trip, and he didn't understand it at all. The fourth victim of the coop hospital took the longest time of all to heal. Even Perlotte was breathing better, her cough gone, her breath able to handle a song now and again, before this one healed. This one moaned much in his pain. He moaned at the level of a shout, and he shouted his moans at any given ascension of the sun, but most especially at night. When all the coop had settled into sleep, this one would have his most stabbing pains. "Ignore it," he would suddenly moan. "Put it out of your minds. Beryl, bring me no water. It is too much a burden for the least of you to consider what I am enduring, and I would not have the least of you suffer my suffering. Not a drop, Beryl, not a moist handkerchief, but sleep, sleep on." And should one or another of the sleepers happen accidentally to wake, this mourner would moan, "Wait! Be patient. Patience, you gentlefolk, have in abundance. Wait, for I am going outside in a little. I'll carry this torment out to the weather. But you sleep with the peace which God has given you." And then he would duly step outside of the coop, and there he would bellow his moan with the quietness of a cannon. Mundocani's problem was that tiny mice had bitten tiny pieces out of the roof of his cavernous mouth, not to mention a cramp in his tongue. But ah, beauty! None of this moaning ever awakened Chanticleer from his good dreams. So joyful had the cock become. And let it be unwritten what grief such oblivious rejection caused a dog. Chapter 10. The winter comes, with snow and with a marriage. The raining never stopped. From horizon to horizon the clouds were locked in place, and the earth was shut up. An east wind, an odd wind to command the weather, brought this wetness and never stopped bringing it. But perhaps God looked down from his heaven and had pity upon the coop, for a merciful change occurred in the rain. It became snow, and where water as rain was mere misery, the same water as snow was a soft delight. A hard freeze made the ground bony and firm. Snow followed to whiten and to reveal the gentle contour of that ground. The cold air snapped life into the trees who ventured forth to walk on it. The forest greeted them, tinkling and clinking, as if its great trees had tiny voices, and more than any of that, the coop became muffled in its warmth, because snow drifted up the outside of its walls. Now the place was no longer strange to the beautiful Perlotte, and she sang some clear, haunting melodies. Her singing was like the moon in a wintry night, sharp edges, hard silver, slow in its motion, and full of grace. So it took the place of so much that was missing in those days, for there was no moon. And in this season of the snow, one other fine thing happened. Chanticleer and the hen of the blazing throat were married. Early one morning, before lauds and before any sleeper had awakened, Chanticleer had crept to Perlotte's side in order to talk with her. He heard the wind outside, and he heard from a great distance the ice on the river shooting off its mighty guns, for the night was very cold. "You are a singer," Chanticleer said in a low voice. The beautiful Perlotte moved in order to show that she was awake. She raised and then lowered her head. "Some of God's creatures sing. Some very few are singers. You, lady, are among those very few." Bang went the river ice, and Chanticleer was suddenly pleased to hear it, because it made him feel all the more snug with her who listened to him. "Will you sing a melody for me now?" She hummed for him, a quiet melody like ringing crystal, neither clearing her throat nor raising her head first. It was as if the melody had always been on the rim of her soul, waiting for the touch to release it. And Chanticleer was moved. This melody was for no one but him. It was offered at his request. It was so immediate, so ready, but altogether new. So he felt a little more bold to ask the thing which had long been on his mind. "My beautiful Pertolote," he said about the melody when it was done, and he held his peace for the moment. And then he said, "Don't be angry for my asking this, but listen and then answer me. It's not a hard question. It's an important one." He waited. "My beautiful Pertolote, are you afraid of me?" She raised her head and looked at him. "No," she said. Chanticleer waited, then blinked, and then he cleared his throat. He thought there would be more to her answer than that, since there had been so much to the question. "But there was a time," he began again, "when you were afraid of me. Isn't that so?" "No, never," she said easily. "So you say," he said lamely, searching for words. "Never." "Since I have lived in this coop, proud Chanticleer," she said, and his heart leaped to hear her speak of her own accord. "I have looked at you with wonder. I have never been afraid of you." Bang went the river. "Does wonder," she said, "look like fear to you? That would be foolish." "Oh, no," he said. "I know wonder and I know the difference, but I don't know what to do with wonder when I see it in you. Wonder is also different from respect, greater than respect. Because I know what to do with respect when I see it in the other hens, I command it, and I draw away from it. But wonder, you are not like any other hen to me." The beautiful Pertolote smiled and said nothing. Bang! The ice exploded, grinding against itself, and Chanticleer went back to his earlier question because it truly bothered him. "Forgive me, was there ever a time when you were afraid of me, even before you came to my coop?" He was trying to focus upon a particular time without actually naming that time. He was afraid that if he said, "when we first met on the shore of the river," he might resurrect dangerous feelings all over again, and then everything would be lost. Such a delicate game he played. Pertolote said, "No, never." Chanticleer popped. "But you screamed at me!" There was his great anguish, and the memory that knifed him. And immediately when he had said the thing aloud, he held his breath to see what she would do. Maybe, remembering, she would begin to scream again, and then what? But she only said, "Yes, I screamed at you." "Oh, Pertolote," he went on in spite of himself, "you ran away from me, and when I held you, you tried to blind me. Do you remember that?" "Of course I do. Yes, I did those things to you." "Then you were afraid of me." "I'm sorry about it, Chanticleer." "But you were afraid of me." The ice cracked and rumbled. The rumbling came even through the earth. She waited until it was done, and there was pure, dark silence. "No, I have never been afraid of you." Now Chanticleer heard more than the words. He heard the tone of her voice. More than that, she was talking straight to the frightful moment and still confessing her peace with him. Therefore Chanticleer, who simply could not let it lie, took courage and probed it further. "If you weren't afraid," he said slowly, "what then?" "Proud Chanticleer," she said so softly, "you always think more thoughts than someone has said to you. I was afraid, but I was not afraid of you. I was—" Pertolote broke it off. This was the first time since she had come to Chanticleer's coop that she was talking about herself. It was difficult to do. "I was afraid of what I saw in you," she said. The rooster's head came up erect, and he knew a chill. "What you saw in me? You saw something in me to terrify you. What?" There was a long silence, and then Pertolote spoke very carefully. "Chanticleer, what I thought I saw in you was not there. What I saw should not have been. My seeing was not true. The thing was not there, nor could it ever be there in you. I know that. My imagination made me afraid, but I was not afraid of you." So kindly she tried to reassure him, but reassurance without a fact or two left the poor rooster in a fit of his own imaginings about himself and about the monster in him that might one day make her scream again. "What did make you afraid?" he pleaded. "It doesn't matter," she said. He could hear by her voice that her head was down. "It wasn't there." "Tell me what it was. Tell me, I will judge." "It doesn't matter, sir," she said. "Tell me, Pertolote," Chanticleer cried, almost angry. "Tell me, so that I should never become the thing you fear, Pertolote. I should despair to be the thing that makes you afraid." "Lord Chanticleer!" Pertolote spoke with so much authority. More than that, there was such a choking pain in her voice that the rooster swallowed and fell silent. And then she continued, "Lord Chanticleer, you are something to me, but you are asking me to remember things I don't want to remember. You want me to name a name which suffocates me. I don't want to go back, Chanticleer. Not even in my mind do I want to go back." She was beseeching him, and leaving pauses in her speech so that he might say something. "I don't want to ruin the peace which your coop has given me. I don't want to die again." "Then don't," Chanticleer said in his mind, but he didn't say it out loud, and a long time passed by, and then, "You looked like Cockatrice." Pertolote breathed the words so very softly, and Chanticleer began to hate himself. I thought there were scales on your stomach, but it was only mud. I thought I had not gotten away, that there was nowhere in the world to hide, but it was you with a bleeding wound, and your name isn't Cockatrice, it's Chanticleer. But I didn't know that, and I screamed so. In the silence that followed, Chanticleer almost didn't breathe. He held himself in utter contempt. He wished that he could hold her now, to comfort her, but at the same time he felt that he had lost that right forever by forcing her, for his own petty foolishness, backward into such an obvious pain. After all this, he had not the slightest idea who Cockatrice might be, so it was a worthless triumph. His was a damn-hollow victory. In return for a name which meant nothing to him, he had separated himself from the beautiful Pertolote. In return for what? A Cockatrice? He had caused her a nameless hurt all over again. "Lady," he managed to say, scraping the floor with a fat and stupid claw, "I'm sorry." She said nothing. "I'm not even fearful," he mumbled, "just cheap." Still she said nothing, and that was, he thought, as it should be. But he heard a stirring where she was, and then she came very close to him, and laid her head upon his shoulder. Immediately every thought of apology fled from his brains. Immediately he was breathing very much. Immediately he stretched his wings around her for the second time, and held her tightly and gurgled. She had come to him for comfort. Why, then, what a comfort he would be to her! But now that he wanted them, the poor Chanticleer had absolutely no words to say. They had all gone away, and he was left with an empty head on account of her willing touch. Out of his empty head there stuck a beak, and upon that beak there began to dance a silly smile. He turned his neck, and in the half-light he smiled at everyone in the coop, one at a time, though every last one of them was sleeping. And when the river ice exploded its most remarkable gun, a splitting crack which made the coop to tremble, Chanticleer thought it to be a most charming and meaningful sound. So they were married in the snow. It was a snow wedding, for they made their procession through the snow, and the snow fell on them as they went. In front of a long line of dancing animals there strutted a proud golden cock, and next to him his bride. And the feathers at her throat were flames so crimson and so intense that they warmed the cock beside her. "Yahoo!" This amazing cheer came from the middle of the procession. Animals turned around when they heard it, but when they looked, they couldn't tell for sure who had made it, for in the middle of the procession was Mundocani Dog, and riding on his nose Tick-Tock the Black Ant. Now, Mundur the canny dog was weeping so helplessly that no one thought the cheer had come from him, and surely the dignified little ant on the tip of his nose wouldn't have, but there on his tiny black face was a tiny black smile. In the middle of a white field, all the dancers formed a wide ring around Chanticleer and his bride. Then they stamped the snow down in special places to write words in it and to draw pictures there. The pictures were blooming flowers, snow lilies, and the winter rose. Someone drew a magnificent stallion in the snow, with its mane wild in the wind. Someone else drew the midnight sky and filled it with all the stars which had not been seen for months. Another one drew a map of Chanticleer's land and drew an iron fence all the way around it to say, "This land is protected." Beryl was the last to draw. She came forward, shy and delicate, and she drew her picture with much love. When she was done, the entire congregation said, "Ah," though hers was perhaps the simplest drawing of all. Yet it was the most perfect. She had drawn 3 fair eggs, one beside the other in the snow. Chanticleer said, "I will name them now." The animals fell silent to listen. "I will name them 10-pin and 5-pin and 1-pin, and they shall all be sons." The animals cheered, and Chanticleer burst into joyful laughter. The beautiful Perlotte put her head down and was happy. These were the gifts which his animals had brought him on his wedding day, and the words which they wrote in the snow were these: "Our Lord and Lady stand in the eye of God. Let him be kind to them." Here ends the first part of the story about Chanticleer the rooster and his coop, Worms Keepers.